This week on 50 States, 50 Dishes, we head back on up to New England, to the birthplace of 4 of our presidents, home to my Boston Red Sox, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to make ourselves some clam chowder. Now, for our recipe this week, I couldn't find one that I used directly, so I actually will be posting the recipe that's closest to the one I utilized, and then I'll notate what I changed about it in the voiceover after we go ahead and get started. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and get started. These are all the ingredients you're going to need to make our New England style clam chowder for the state of Massachusetts. As you can see, I'm using canned clams, which are already cooked and chopped before being canned. You can use fresh clams if you'd like, but it's going to be a little bit more work on your own. The recipe is just the same with fresh or canned clams, as long as you steam those clams first. Go ahead and peel up your potatoes. You're going to need 2 good sized ones. Get those washed and peeled. Then we're going to move on to the celery, 2 stalks. Chop them right down the middle. And get rid of the white bits on the end, and then you're going to just kind of dice them up as quick as possible. Put it yourself into a side bowl, a little prep bowl off to the side. We're going to be chopping up that onion as well and putting that on top. Since chowder functions a lot like a stew, it's not really a precise science for how small or diced or any of your individual elements are, as long as you're happy with the size, because they're all going to be cooked at the same time in one big pot. Speaking of a pot, let's go ahead and get started with our little stew pot. We're going to render down 5 strips of bacon. This is actually going to be one of the starting points for the chowder in an area that I altered from the original recipe. While those 5 strips of bacon render down and get that fat out, it's time to chop up your potatoes and get those in a different prep bowl. Since they're a starch, they're going to cook a little bit different than the onion and celery, so we're going to want to keep them separate from those. 2 tablespoons of butter will be added to your bacon now. Let all that melt and get mixed around. Here, you should actually add 3 tablespoons of flour right after adding the onion and celery. I missed that step in my preparation. I'll be doing it later, but if you want to do it properly, you need to add the 3 tablespoons of flour at that point. Moving on, you're going to add your can of vegetable or chicken broth, and then in my case, 3 small cans worth of clam juice. You can drain it right out of the can. It should be about 20 ounces of clam juice. A cup of heavy cream. Get all that cooking together and stir in your potatoes. And this is when we start adding some spices. You're going to throw in 2 bay leaves like we did with jambalaya a couple weeks back. I used some black pepper, some salt, some thyme, and some Old Bay seasoning. In most cases, I went with about a half a teaspoon of each, but it's really up to individual taste. And as I'm going to mention later, be sure that you are tasting what you're making as you go on with it, so you know if you need to add a little bit more of this. You can never add less, so it's always good to add a little bit, try it out, maybe add a little bit more after that. Here is where I added the 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. As you can see, they immediately start trying to cook, which is going to create a ball of uncooked flour. If you do this exactly as the video does and mix it up like I do, one good thing to do is while stirring it, get yourself a whisk and just break up that flour so it can mix around with everything else. It's really going to thicken up that chowder. Add in your clams, let it simmer for about 2 minutes, and you're ready with your clam chowder. So, with all of that, you should have your New England style clam chowder. It should be a little thick despite me messing up when to add the flour. Hopefully you did it properly and you're at home version. And I kind of had to combine 2 recipes to make this, so this is going to be a little bit interesting. Oh, it is still very hot. But here we go. Yeah. It just tastes like chowder. Like, this is like kind of the only chowder I've really had, so it just tastes like chowder. It's good though. Like, we snuck Old Bay seasoning into our recipe here, so that adds a nice little kick to it. And with all things, you should taste it as you're making it, so you can get an experience of what it's going to be like when you get to the final product. That being said, I'm going to wrap up eating this clam chowder and try not to burn the inside of my mouth. Let's head back to the room and talk about what we're doing next week. So that was clam chowder for the state of Massachusetts. Next week we'll be returning to regular updates. I took a week off for mine and my wife's anniversary, and it kind of put me behind in my cooking/production schedule. So next week we'll be returning to regular updates on 50 States, 50 Dishes with the state of Wyoming. But stay tuned right now for our trivia question of the week. What was I saying? Oh.